What's up, guys? This is Matt Ramsey with the Octave Higher East Voice Studio in Austin, Texas, and we need to talk. We need to talk about one of the biggest tools that every professional singer will absolutely need to have some knowledge of. It's not sexy, but here it is. We need to talk about vowels. Well, guys, when we're talking about, vowels being the pro singer's best friend, we're talking, of course, about the sounds that you find in words in between consonants. So in the word cry, we have the I. In the word cut, we have the In the word mom, we have the ah. Now, why on earth could these be so important to a pro singer that they need to have a good foundational working knowledge of them? Well, the simple fact is that every vowel kind of has its little resonant sweet spots to it. It's got little places that vowels really like to kind of vibrate or resonate at. And this actually, you can go through a piano, you can look at the different frequencies on a piano, and different vowels will work better, will have their signals boosted more in particular ways than others. And that's a whole other discussion. Those are about formants. But in any case, what you need to know as a professional singer regarding vowels has to do with narrowing and opening or widening vowels. So an example of a narrow vowel is ooh. And you can see why an ooh would be considered a narrow vowel, right? My mouth is very, very narrow, ooh, in order to pronounce that vowel. Versus a more wide or a more open vowel like ah or ah, right? And so a lot of it has to do with how open the jaw is, and what actually forms those sounds has to do with where your tongue is placed in your mouth and a whole bunch of other fun stuff like that. But the most important difference for you to be able to note is an open or a close vowel. Okay, so an open vowel being ah or ah, is kind of in the middle, and more close vowels being ooh, e, a, stuff like that, and those ones are kind of in the middle as well, with e and ooh being the most narrow. So as you're singing, you may notice that as you go up in your voice, from the bottom to the top of your voice, your vowels may start to kind of change themselves. So for instance, if I sing like an ah, ah, so that ah on the top isn't so much ah as it is on the bottom. Ah, that's more like an ah, almost like an So what I've done there is I have used the vowel for me rather than against me. Rather than making myself track that vowel all the way to the top end, and creating a really, really kind of strainy or just overworked, hyper-functional tone, I've allowed that vowel to change slightly towards So what I've done in a very, very passive way is something that they call passive vowel modification, which simply means that I'm allowing that vowel to kind of change on its own to kind of find that sweet spot in my voice. Now, you may not be able to do this unless you've had a lot of lessons or a really good qualified certified instructor who's able to kind of like help you find those places in your voice, but that doesn't mean that you can't use it to your advantage. The only way that you need to know how to use it to your advantage is you need to know, okay, do I need a little bit more kind of a smaller vowel to hit a higher note, or do I need like maybe a little bit more of an open vowel to hit a lower note? Now, this is not the end-all be-all. It doesn't mean that for every single high note you want a narrow vowel and for every single low note you want an open vowel, but that knowledge can help you that it is easier for your voice sometimes to hit top notes with a little bit more of a close vowel. So let's see an example of that. I always like to use I love to use the example of Stevie Wonder's Lately. So as he's going into his first passage, because he's a guy, he's going into this E and this F here, he's singing, always start to cry. Okay, so he doesn't go, always start to cry. He says, always start to cry. Now I think that he came across with such a better sound because all he did was he allowed that vowel to kind of change itself as it's going into that place. Now, he had a lot of great voice lessons, a lot of great voice teachers. One of the founders of the technique that I currently teach taught him. But for you, if you're trying to hit those same notes and you're trying to figure out how to do that, all you need to do is take a more open vowel and just narrow it just slightly so that can make it a little bit easier to get into that transitional place for you. Like I said, this won't always work. Sometimes you need a more open vowel to hit a high note, but just for this particular instance, let's say that you need a more narrow vowel, which is like, maybe 50 or 60% of the cases. So he goes, always start to cry. So rather than saying all, he says all. Always start to cry. And rather than saying ways, he says wheeze. Always start to cry. So here's the difference. I mentioned passive vowel modification. Here's active vowel modification. Always start to cry. So you notice that that wheeze actually turned into like really just saying wheeze. Always. So a more passive form or a more subtle form, and the form that I would recommend you as a singer try to emulate yourself, is try to find a blend between those two vowels, between the ah and the on the always. So always start to cry rather than all or just all, always. It's got a little bit of both in it. And that same thing holds true for the ways, because it's rather than W-A-Y, ways. It's more like ways. It's almost like W-E-Y. It's kind of crazy. So all you have to do is look at like a vowel or an IPA chart. IPA is kind of like a pronunciation guide, and I'll go ahead and post that on the website so that you can look at it yourself. All you have to do is kind of just pick out the next closest vowel from there and see if you can, that makes it a little bit easier for you to hit some of those high notes. And the vice versa is true for hitting some of those lower notes. Sometimes a more open vowel on the bottom can help you grab just a little bit more chest voice on the bottom end of your voice. Like I said, there's lots of exceptions, but I just wanted to give you something to play around with so that you can start to modify them yourself and see what starts to work for you. Now, before you go off and do that, I just wanted to address one thing. This may seem kind of silly when you're doing it for the first time. You're like, okay, it totally feels like I'm just saying always. Okay, help me, Matt. What's wrong? Well, it may be that you are, finding a nice blend in between those two vowels, and the audience hears it completely different. They hear always start to cry. But you being, a pro singer who's experimenting with different vowels, you figured out a way that you can kind of cheat, because I guarantee they're not going to say, did he say always? Always? Is that what he said? I'm paying good money for this? No, they're going to hear always start to cry. Hope that makes sense. Guys, I want you to play around with this. Have a great week. Bye.